Hi, and welcome to First Things First, the show where you learn how to build a thriving nonprofit and live inspired. Today, I want to talk with you about the best fundraising tactic ever, and we're going to do it Vegas style. Well, back in the 1980s, which dates myself a little, I was a stock options trader at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. I was one of those guys that yell and scream on the floor all day. Yeah, and so really, that's kind of like financial gambling, but in some way, what you're really doing is you're weighing out risk and reward. And that's a way to kind of beat the odds and beat the house. Now, at blackjack, you know that you're playing against the house. The odds are in the house's favor, right? But you can do things to get the odds in your favor, such as counting cards and making sure that you bet at the right time and knowing the odds and those kinds of things. Well, the same holds true when you're trying to raise money for donors, meaning, of course, it's not like gambling, but what you can do and what you want to do is you want to increase the chances of your donors giving money. You want to put the odds in your favor so you can win the fundraising game. Now get this, more than 80% of all money that's donated to charities comes from people, and 80% of that comes from face-to-face giving. Now think about that. 80% of all money that's donated to charities comes from people, and 80% of that comes from face-to-face giving. Now most organizations, and you'll have to think about how much you give, how much time and effort are you spending in face-to-face giving? 5%, 10%, 15%? That's the average. But 70%, almost 70% of the money is coming from that method. So what does that tell you? It tells you you have a huge opportunity gap, right? So here you are at 5, 10, or 15%, and almost 70% of money is coming from that particular channel, that income method, and that tells you there's a big, big opportunity gap for you to raise more money. And yes, you might be raising money from grants and galas and government contracts. That's all fine. But if you really want to start raising the big money, you want to play the odds and you want to beat the house, you need to do more face-to-face fundraising. Okay, now here's another statistic. More than 70% of people will say yes to your ask if you ask them in a face-to-face setting. Think about that. More than 70%, 7 out of 10 people will say yes to your ask if you ask them in a face-to-face setting. John, would you be willing to give $500 to support the Hunger Coalition's new soup kitchen? That's it. And this is why it's so important to be spending time in face-to-face settings, because the percentages are so high. It's efficient. It only takes an hour. It gives a chance to share your passion and to create dialogue and talk with the donor and build a relationship and tell about the impact you're having and the impact and the difference their donation makes. You can't do that in an email. You can't do that in a grant. It's face-to-face fundraising is the method for getting connected and building a relationship with your donor. And again, 70% of people will say yes to your ask if you just ask them. And get this, it goes to 90%. 90% of people will say yes to your ask if they volunteer, they have an emotional connection to your nonprofit, and you ask them in a setting where your programming's taken place. That creates that emotional connection and gets them fired up to give on the spot. All right? So what does this tell you? It tells you that you need to be spending more time with your donors asking for money in face-to-face settings. Most money, almost 2/3 of all money, comes from asking donors for money in face-to-face settings. And you're spending, 5, 10, or 15%? You got to get that number up. Get it up to 35, 45, 50%. That is what you'll have to do. Yep, you might have to reallocate some of your resources and say, well, okay, maybe we can spend a little less time on our gala or a little less time writing grants or somehow manage that. We understand that's not always easy, but you can do it. And just make sure that you're spending that time, that quality time, to increase the percentages, because in the end, if you want to raise more money and you spend more time with your donors, you are going to increase your chances, you're going to increase your odds, and you are going to beat the house, and you are going to win at the fundraising game, and you're going to do it Vegas style. Well, thanks for tuning in. And remember, keep fueling your passion and giving back, because the world needs more people like you to make it a better place. Have an outstanding day.